Guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about what has really been going on with Reddit. This was highly requested, but aside from that, I think it's important because I feel like I'm seeing the words Reddit a lot. I'm seeing the word Aimee Knight, but then I'm not really seeing like what exactly is going on. So I figured I'd give you guys a basic rundown of what's going on. I apologize in advance if I'm looking down at my phone, but I made an extensive amount of notes because the situation is in some ways very simple, but also in some ways very confusing at the same time. So basically, recently there were 200 subreddits that set themselves as private, which might not sound like a big deal, but some of these subreddits are subreddits such as r/music that has about 27 million members. So when that particular number of subreddits puts itself as private, in a way to, I wouldn't use the term protest, it sounds a little bit extra, but in a way to push back to Reddit in order to take action. And you might be wondering why exactly that is. All of this controversy surrounds a trans woman named Aimee Challoner, but she got married, so now she goes by Aimee Knight. People were critiquing Reddit for hiring Knight due to her connections to her father, whom she had hired as an agent when she was involved in UK politics, specifically in this case, the Green Party. So she chose him specifically to be with her in her political career, which doesn't sound crazy until it came out that he had been accused, and he later was convicted, to be clear, he was convicted for this, of raping and torturing a 10-year-old child. So this led to Knight's campaign to be suspended in 2018. So Knight later on didn't really apologize, but kind of put out a statement saying that she acknowledged why people thought that this was bizarre, which I'm going to comment on in a second. And she said, "On reflection, I can understand that it wasn't acceptable for me to appoint my dad as my election agent when he had been arrested. I can now understand the potential risks of that decision." Later on in 2019, Knight found herself in a relatively similar situation, suspended again, but this time from the Liberal Democrats Party due to her husband, who is still her husband now, who allegedly posted fantasies about children on Twitter. Knight said that his account had been hacked. So taking a quick pause here, the summary is Reddit hired Knight. Knight is connected to two separate situations that involve children inappropriately and pedophilia, basically. So you might be wondering why Reddit hired someone who is so enveloped in scandals, but I wouldn't even call it scandals because that seems to minimize it, but crimes against or related to children. So that's pretty much where all hell broke loose. But it somehow gets worse. Because Knight is a trans woman, and unsurprisingly, she'd received a lot of transphobic hate. Nothing to do with any of this factual stuff that I'm just talking about straight up hate just because she was a trans woman. Because of that, they put a certain amount of protection in to avoid her that type of transphobic harassment. The problem was that they ended up in a certain way overprotecting her because the type of protection they put out was ill thought out, and it ended up putting her above critique. Redditors had posted about Knight, and when they posted about Knight, they were referring to her political past, which is on Wikipedia, it's on multiple websites. If you look up her name, it's one of the first things to come up, so it's not in any way private information or doxing, as she is or was a political public figure. Reddit was essentially suppressing the voices of people who were discussing a public figure. Like I said, all this information was very much out there. Nothing was doxed in terms of the actual meaning of doxing, like releasing someone's address, private number, blah, blah, blah. Everything that was discussed was very much public. So an administrator then responded to this situation saying, quote, "Earlier this month, a Reddit employee was the target of harassment and doxing. Reddit activated standard processes to protect the employee from such harassment, including initiating an automated moderation rule to prevent personal information from being shared. The moderation rule was too broad, and this week it incorrectly suspended a moderator who posted content that included personal information." Reddit also added, "Our intent was never to remove any and all mentions of this admin's name." So thankfully, the person who was banned was unbanned. Part of the issue is that to outsiders or to these moderators, it looked like Reddit preferred to protect her over them because of this too broad of a protection that essentially made it so that anything that involved her name would disappear or get you banned or something like that, when her name effectively, as we know, since she's a public political figure, is not doxing. It would be the equivalent of naming a celebrity. That's not doxing. That's a discussion about someone who is a public figure. And hence, people were very angry because it seemed like Reddit was taking her side as opposed to everybody else's, who was like only trying to really bring awareness. Now, of course, there's always people who, like I said, were being transphobic or hateful just for that, as opposed to critique, which are two different things, as we well know. Because of Reddit's explanation that was kind of like, oh, we were trying to protect her from harassment, and what happened was that people got banned, a lot of people were not impressed with that, and a lot of people, moderators and just general Reddit users, weren't taking that as an actual response. So then a moderator actually responded to this saying, "You've completely ignored the real issue. The person you have hired is at best sympathetic to pedophilia. I don't condone doxing virtually anyone, but what you're describing isn't doxing, it's posting the name of a public figure." So as of right now, what's happened is that Reddit has let Knight go, and then they also put out an announcement, which I'll put on screen after this, so if you want to read the whole thing you can, but it's rather lengthy, and the basic bottom line is that they apologized because they addressed the fact that they hadn't dealt with this properly. But the bigger thing was also that they said that their vetting process to decide who's going to work at Reddit or who they're employing isn't at the standard they'd like. Now, the reason this is such a big deal is because, first of all, Reddit is a massive platform. So for this platform to hire someone who is so closely tied to such controversial things like two close family members being allegedly involved, well, one's convicted, so that's not alleged, but the other one involved in pedophilia or generally inappropriate behavior towards children, that's alarming because a lot of Reddit users came to this conclusion, which I think makes entire sense, is either they didn't Google her, because if you Google her name, the issues with her father and her husband are the first things to come up, or they Googled her and still decided to hire her. So I think the big crux of the matter is that both of these potential situations are equally disturbing, because on one hand we have they barely vet anyone to the point where there's not even a basic Google, and the other option is they Googled, they found, and they decided, who cares? And I think the bottom line is none of these people are calling for extremely invasive vetting processes, but at the same time, it's like, because this was so basic, because just a Google was enough, it makes you wonder, okay, what are they doing then if they're just not ignoring things? Anyway, that's what's been going on so far. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always. Let's get right